So here are the templates for our heart hoops that we're doing with herringbone stitch. I've got a 4-inch and a 5-inch. I printed them both out. I wanted to see how big they were, and the 5's just got a bit more space for me. So I'm going to go with that, but it's up to you. I'm using some white quilting cotton here. I'm just going to pop that in position. And I'm going to just check with my hoop that I've got lots of space with that fabric around the edge for when I come to finish it later. I'm going to use an air erasable marker pen to do this. You can use something more permanent if you wish, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so you'll need a ruler for this. This is my very old ruler, and I'm just going to draw over those horizontal lines first. Just really take your time with this. If you want to secure the fabric in position, you can do that as well. I've just taped the template to my table here. So I'm just going to draw over, get that in the right place, draw over all of these horizontal lines first of all. So make sure that you're following the shape of the heart. We're actually going to draw the heart on after we've done all of the lines, so that we can see all of that on the fabric there. Now I can tell that this pen is just disappearing a little bit, so I'm just going to go back over those lines and just draw over them again, just to make sure that they're nice and dark for now. The reason that I decided to use this air erasable pen is so that I don't have to, like with the water pens that I use, so you have to use the brush to get rid of all the marks. Whoops! Sorry, flying pen. I'm having one of those days today, honestly. What was I saying? Oh yeah, about the water pen. Because the herringbone stitches are really quite fiddly, I just felt that that was going to be a bit more hassle than it was worth. So I just thought with the air erasable pen, at least once I've stitched it, I don't have to spend ages like trying to get all the visible pen strokes out with the brush. I just thought that would be a complete faff, to be honest, and nobody's got time for that. So I've gone with this one. It might be a good idea to draw over it twice like I've done here. I'm just trying to press down a little bit harder as I draw around the edge there. So let's put the lid on. I'll try not to throw it away. There we go. We can put that to one side, just take the template off and move that out of the way. And now we can get this in our hoop. Now I think I'm going to paint this pink, but I'm not sure yet. I'll decide that in a bit once I've done some stitching and stitch one later. So just get this in position, get all the bits of cotton that are loose off the fabric there. Make sure you're happy with it. Push it down and tighten the screw. Make sure that your tension's okay. You want it to be nice and flat, but you don't want the fabric to be pulled out of shape in any way, because we don't want to change the shape of the weave on the fabric. There we go. Right, okay, so I'm using some lovely DMC thread. This is shade 605. I've got 3 strands on my needle because, as you know by now, if you've seen lots of these, it's my favourite. Okay, I'm going to stitch the top 2 in the lightest shade, following the shape of the hearts. Okay, I've got the 2 lines to help me. I said that on the tutorial video that I was going to do that in the project, and that's because I just kind of went for it freestyle when I did the tutorials, and I want to try and make it a little bit neater, at least make them all the same height. So I'm going to start on this second row down, just because I thought those 2 top bits might be a little bit tricky to start with this stitch. I wanted to kind of get a hang of it on much more of a sort of straighter, fuller line. We'll cross the bridge of the heart bit when we come to it. Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, so I've crossed here. There we go. Now, I think technically, because I'm going to be moving to the other direction, I should have actually gone under there. As I'm thinking about it, I should have gone under there. I'm going to unpick this last stitch, I think, but I'm going to leave the first one in, because no one's going to know, are they? Even when, even though you've watched this video, no one's going to know. Let me just quickly thread my needle. Okay, so remember that when you're doing the herringbone stitch, the cross, I'm just going to thread that under there, just to try and disguise that a little bit. There we go. No one's going to notice that one's, it's like in the wrong place, it doesn't matter. There we go, let's pull that through. Okay, let's carry on. We're going to work from left to right with these herringbone stitches. Okay, so the thread that I'm using it's 5 different colours. So this one is 605. Let's pull that through there and cross over. And that's the lightest shade, and I'm going to use that on top 2. And then the other shades, I'm basically going to work through the 600 series of DMC threads. So I'm using 605 now, and it'll be 604, 603, 602, and then 601. And these pinks just blend so beautifully. I've used them in one of the projects in my book for the same ombre effect, and I love it. It's the same series of pinks, just going from light to dark, and they're beautiful. They blend really nicely, and I think for a first sort of ombre project, it's nice to just have those few colours that you can work with to blend them. If you're feeling adventurous and you're selecting your own, then just go for it. Just pick a series of colours that you feel kind of blend. I'm going for that real gradual blend in this project. But you don't have to. You could just use rainbow colours or any colours from your loose ends. Just kind of freestyle it a bit. It's entirely up to you. So as you can see, I'm using the horizontal lines that I've drawn. I'm using those as a guide to do these stitches. Now you could, if you wanted to, you could draw some little marks on so that you make them nice and evenly spaced even. I'm just going for it here. Moving across and crossing over each time. Now you can do a clever little trick with your needle. So you see that I'm just doing individual stitches here. You can sort of push it through a bit and then cleverly come up to the left where I've just come through there. And if you want to have a go at that, have a look at the herringbone stitch tutorial on YouTube that I've also shared today as well, because I started out by giving that a go, and then I decided that actually I just preferred doing the stitches individually. It just feels a bit more comfortable to me. And as you know, with this project, I'm all about finding out what works best for you. Just because a book says you should do it this way doesn't mean that it's going to work best for you. So if it's a new stitch for you, like it was for me this week, I would say have a go at both. Have a little practice on your practice hoop. Find another piece of fabric that you can do a little bit more on, and then just really see what feels most comfortable and do that. That's honestly the best way. I mean, the effect is the same. You don't look at it and think, well, she didn't do that by coming up to the left. Like, nobody knows. So, yeah, find your own way with it. So you can see that what I did in the middle there was I've just continued to stitch the herringbone stitches, but I've obviously only gone as far as the edge of the heart. And actually, it's quite easy to do that naturally. So you can always kind of put your needle and thread kind of like, if it was to carry on, where would it be? And kind of move backwards and down a bit, kind of think about the angles. So sort of pretend that you were going to be kind of, if there was a continuous line in that gap there, you could think, right, well, the stitch was going to go there. This is the angle that it'd be at, and actually need to come out there instead. Use that thread as a guide. But it's building up really nicely. And no, my stitches aren't all even, and that's okay. It's not a problem. I'm liking the look of this. Just pull the tension. Check your tension all the time with this. And as you're going along the row, what you might find is that if you pull it a little bit too tightly, that the fabric at the back of the row that you're stitching might sort of start to gather a bit. So check that you're not pulling your thread too tightly, because we want to try and keep our fabric nice and flat if possible. So always check the tension of your fabric, always check that, I'm just going to pull that stitch out there as I'm talking about this, check that you're not pulling it too tightly, because we don't want it to be all bobbly. We want it to be nice and flat with those stitches just kind of sitting on top. So we just need a few more stitches to get us to the end of this first row. And it's looking really nice. I'm pretty pleased with this, to say it's my first time. It hasn't come hugely naturally to me. I think because this is a stitch that might also work really well on like counted fabric. So if you're used to doing cross stitch and you stitch on Ada, or if you've ever stitched embroidery, done counted embroidery, which you do on like special linen that's got a certain count to it, where you can count the spaces between the weave, I think herringbone stitch might be something to experiment on there if you want it to be super duper accurate and neat. It might be worth experimenting with that, and maybe I'll get around to that and do an additional tutorial at some point. But it's been fun to kind of, it's been really fun to do a stitch that's taken me a bit more work, if that makes sense. It hasn't come naturally, but I'm enjoying the challenge of doing it. So we've got to the end here. I'm just going to tie off at the back, just with a little double knot here, nice and close to the fabric. Oops, left myself a bit short. Try not to do that. But just enough. There we go. Let's get that right close. Again, don't pull too tight here. You don't want to pull your stitches and your fabric out of shape. There we go. Ta-da! First row is done. So now I'm going to go back in the same colour and I'm going to fill in the top bits. I'm going to try and use these little gaps here, start there and work upwards around the shape of the heart. So we'll see how that goes. It's all just a big experiment really, which I love. I'm really finding that learning these new stitches is kind of helping to alleviate some of that creative block that I felt like I had for a little while. So thanks for joining in with me. Thanks for letting me ramble on in these videos and still listening. Anyway, there we go. So I'm just going to go through here and then work up to the top. So I'm trying to keep the shape of that heart and follow those lines as much as I can. Now obviously my herringbone stitches aren't 100% evenly spaced, so all of these aren't going to be exact. But I'm hoping that the overall effect of them, you know, you're kind of getting this sort of gradation in the colour and the building up of the pattern. I'm hoping that you just won't notice that. Okay, so let's go back through there. Yeah, there we go. Right, so just again trying to keep them sort of as level as I can, going through, looking at those gaps that have been created in the top of the previous row, and then following that line, that beautiful curved line. I think the thing to remember is also on the previous line we were going with 2 horizontal lines, weren't we? Just going to move that up there to see where I want that to go. Obviously this is a very much a curved edge at the top, which I'm not sure that herringbone stitch was 100% designed for that, so I think we're just going to make it work for us. I'm going to come up through that gap there and go and follow that round, just lift that up there. Yeah, there we go. So what I was talking about earlier in the video about using the thread and kind of working out the angles and stuff, that's exactly what I mean there. So just kind of holding the thread up to kind of work out where your needle needs to go, either in or whatever. Okay, let's just check your tension. Let's carry on. Yeah, let's put that in there. marvellous. If you're wondering why I am going to boost the sound on this, I'm talking fairly quietly because it's about 9:15 on a Monday evening as I'm recording this. And my kids are asleep. My littlest, his room is next door, so I'm trying not to disturb him. Hopefully he won't wake up. Right, I am actually going to tie off at the end of this first half because I don't want the line of the thread to show through the fabric. And there isn't, as you can see, there aren't any other stitches that I can kind of thread through at the back. So I think in terms of neatness, I'm going to do that. Just got the other half to go. And here we go. Right, so you can see I've started the third row and that's in the second colour. So this is 604 that I'm using here. And I'm just going to carry on in exactly the same way. So like when we did the tops of the hearts, each side of the heart just then, I'm using those spaces that are created between the stitches to be where the tops of the herringbones cross on this row below. Oops, there we go. So yeah, it's not 100% mathematical in any way, but I feel like now that this row is coming along nicely, I feel like I'm getting a bit more of a sense of how this pattern's going to go. And it's been really lovely to see lots of people kind of experimenting with their own designs or just kind of doing something a little bit different with the project so far. I'm so pleased because really one of the things that I wanted was for this project to give you the confidence to experiment and just go for it. So it's been amazing. Keep tagging me on Instagram or on Facebook because I love to see what you're up to, and it's just been brilliant. Just you're finding those little bits of creative time, and you're just using it. It makes me so happy every time I get tagged in a picture. It's just fab. So thanks for sharing. So if you're stitching this one this week, pop it in your stories or something or on your grid and just tag me so I can see what you're doing. Right, so I'm going to carry on. I'm going to do this one in the same colour. And then the one in the middle is just going to have one row. And then I'm going to do 2 rows and then 2 rows of the final shade. All the details are on my blog, so if you've missed it, don't worry. So now that that's all stitched, I've popped it into a pink hoop and I went with light pink in the end. And I'm pretty pleased with how that looks. I just ironed the edges and then that just meant that I could reposition it in the hoop. So that I was happy with it. You can still see the pen, and don't worry about that at this stage. What I'm going to do is actually leave it on the windowsill just so that there's some light just to help that along a little bit. Right, so take a big pair of scissors and we're just going to finish the back. So the first thing that we need to do is just trim that excess fabric. So I'm going to trim it down to around sort of 2.5 centimetres, about 1 inch-ish. And just do this bit by eye. There's no need to measure it. No one's going to see the back anyway. So we're just trimming all the way around and try and keep it nice and equal. Just follow the line of the hoop. There we go. And if you haven't seen any of my videos so far, I always leave my hoops open at the back because I think it's really, really nice to see all the work that's gone into the stitching. And I quite like the back of this. It's quite interesting. There's not a lot to it. It's mainly lines and knots, but it's all happening at the front. So there we go. Right. So I'm going to use some pearl thread for this to finish the back. So wrap enough around the hoop so you've got enough to go around. Whoops. Try not to get tangled up. And then I'm just going to tie a knot in the end and leave a little bit of excess thread at the end because you'll need to pull that later on. I'm going to do another knot for luck. You'll need that excess thread just to pull that all together. Right, let's thread the needle on the other end. Here we go. There, super. Right, so again, if you haven't seen this before, I'm just going to basically stitch a running stitch all the way around the hoop whilst trying not to knock my tripod. So if my arms do slightly weird things, that's why I'm trying not to knock the camera. Okay, so you're basically just going through the fabric and pulling it together, and you can see there that as I pull, that fabric is gathering together, and it's just going to pull it all nicely at the back. Last week I showed you a little trick with the hoop, which is to use a screwdriver to tighten the screw at the top. I had a few messages from people saying I didn't know this, and actually it was only a relatively recent discovery for me, to be honest, but it makes a big difference. So before you finish doing this bit at the back, before you start finishing at the back even, it's a good idea, if you're happy with the positioning, just to tighten it with a screwdriver as well, because that'll just make it really nice and secure. Just be careful not to go too tightly, because you don't want to pull the fabric at the front. Okay, so you might have to just undo the screw a little bit if it looks like it's starting to pull. But have a little look at the fern stitch wreath hoop tutorial at the end of that, when we come to the end of the project and we're finishing that. You'll be able to see what I mean. Right, so we're almost there. Here we go. I hope you've enjoyed stitching this week. I think it's been nice to watch the design build up. I've actually stitched this fairly quickly this week, amazingly. But please just remember, as with any of the projects, you just got to work at your own pace. I've got tangled up on here again. So close to not getting tangled. Right, let's get one more stitch. I've done it again. It happens. There we go. It's looking fine at the front. There we go. So yeah, just work at your own pace. That's the best thing. You can always come back to it whenever. So I'm just going to pull that edge and then tie these ends together in a nice secure knot. Remove the needle if it's easier for you. I actually find it quite helpful to be able to sort of pull with my left hand and be able to push a needle through there. It just makes it a bit easier, but if it's a bit cumbersome, just take it off. Whatever is easiest. Oops, try and do one more. Still our fingers and thumbs. There we go. Right. Okay, so once that's nice and secure, just trim those ends off so that they're not hanging off the edge. There we go, and we have now finished our herringbone stitch hoop. So, talking about pulling the fabric, I'm just going to pull that at the back there, because that has there we go, that's much better. Just do that if you need to. So you can still see all the lines, don't worry about that, just leave it on a windowsill and the pen will disappear.